It's clear that an argument has been going on, and it's an infamous and a fairly ancient argument. She says, "You don't bring me flowers anymore." He says, "You don't sing me love songs." But it goes back even further than that. There's an ancient argument going on. The other night I watched the first part of a documentary called Liberated. And it's on Netflix if you want to check it out. And the entire film featured interviews with young millennial men and women who have gone to Florida for spring break. And if you know anything about spring break, you know it's a wild flesh festival. And these individuals interviewed for this documentary, all of them have given up on love. That was kind of one of the main themes. Love is nothing, a bikini-clad, gum-chewing sophomore declares between sips of rum punch. All we do is come down here and try to hook up with as many girls as possible, announces a shirtless guy with dreadlocks. And by hook up, he means, of course, have sexual intercourse. And the documentary just depicts, right, all of these moments. They don't actually show the coitus, but they show people meeting and throwing their bodies at each other with abandon. Asked by the interviewer if he intends to stay in touch with any of these hookups, the man smirks and says, "Nah, we're talking pleasure here. Pleasure." And this is what stuck with me. Getting to know someone just gets in the way of that. Now, I will admit to a certain titillating and morbid curiosity when it comes to people in their 20s offering what they consider to be sophisticated hedonistic philosophy. It does bring back memories, let me put it that way. But as I listen to them deconstruct the Disney version of love, I can't help but feel what I did feel in my 20s, and I remember it to this day. I felt angry. I was angry, I think, because even though I could believe that my mother and father loved me, even though I could believe my siblings loved me, even though I could possibly believe that some of my friends loved me, there was always a gap between us, always a space, always this chasm that could never be crossed. There was always this weird, surreal distance in which I would never totally know them and they would never totally know me. And so they could say, "I love you, man. I love you, son." Right? But there was always this kind of weird, "Yeah, but do you really know what you're loving here?" And so there was anger. I felt angry. Angry, I think, because love seemed to be a facade. It seemed to be this game, right, that people play. And it seemed to fail again and again to perform what it promised to perform, which is it promises to perform genuine, authentic intimacy. That's what love does. Promises. I felt angry because occasionally I would see people who loved each other erupt in explicit arguments, but also how they would also fester with arguments that were more implicit, arguments that would seem to flow and ebb with this ancient ocean of emotion. "We don't want your prayers," wrote Linda Stasi on Valentine's Day this week. "We don't want your prayers. What we want from you right now is to ban assault weapons. We want you to make it impossible for civilians to have AR-15s, period." We want you, elected officials, to stop killing our children while praising God. You know nothing of God, because if you did, you phony liars, you'd stop killing without question by changing the law. Valentine's Day. You see, what this amounts to is an argument. And let me just say as an aside, I support it. I believe that as followers of Jesus, it might be worth hurting some feelings in a discussion about gun control. But at the same time, there's something deeper, right, more subterranean that's happening interpersonally among us. And I think 1 John chapter 4 drills into that. 1 John is a letter. It's not a gospel story. It's a letter written for a community of early first century Christians who found themselves in conflict with other religious people in their neighborhoods. Evidence for this contentiousness may be found earlier in chapter 2, verse 9. Listen to this. Whoever says, I'm in the light, while hating a brother or sister, is still in darkness. Doesn't that speak to you of animosity, contention, conflict? Whoever says, right, that sounds like it's, Linda Stasi all over again. Whoever says, I'm in the light, right, while still hating, is a liar. That's the thing. That's the thing you write when you feel the argument bubbling to the surface. In other words, no one should claim special spiritual status and use that status to demean or belittle another member of the community. Moreover, when I read phrases like this in 1 John, do not love the world, chapter 2, verse 15, and then do not be astonished that the world hates you in chapter 3, verse 13. It's clear that these relationships, you know what they resemble? They resemble the quadruple double sow cow, where you fall. And the music's playing in the background, and the music is so beautiful, and you realize this is not going according to plan, right? I mean, it's in the ideal, they're going to land the jumps, and the music is going to flow, and the artistry is going to be evident, but this is not happening the way things should. We have a choice. We can say, the hell with it. We're never going to develop loving relationships because someone is always going to be argumentative. Or we can say again and again what 1 John says. And it's so repetitive, I think there's a point in this repetition. God is love. God is love. What's love? In this is love. Not that we loved God. Shut up. Stop telling me you love God. Shut up. In this is love. That God loved us. And God knows how to do this. What does God do? Surrenders self. Willing to die. I was listening earlier to a song by U2. It's called Pride in the Name of Love. And the lyric goes, one man caught on a barbed wire fence, one man he resist, one man washed up on an empty beach, one man betrayed with a kiss. And it's this contagion that I think is being invited, right? This dis-ease. Jesus has communicated to us this virus of love. This past Wednesday, as some of you know, was Ash Wednesday. But Cheryl and I went out before we participated in an Ash Wednesday service, and we celebrated Valentine's Day, right? And we looked each other in the eyes, right? We've been married over 30 years. And we said, oh, this food is good. This wine tastes good. And then I looked at her and I said, you know, you're a pain in the butt to me sometimes. Oh, no, but listen. There's a gap between us. I mean, she'll admit it. I'll admit it. Even though I know her probably better than any other human being, there's still this distance between us. What should I do? Should I just give up and say, forget it, I'm never going to overcome that distance? Or should I just still throw myself into that void? That's what I want to do. I want to throw myself into this unknowing void that says, I don't know what or who I'm loving out there, but I'm doing it. On Ash Wednesday, what we do, and I don't know if you participated in a service like this before, but we smear ashes on the forehead in the sign of the cross. And you ask, why do we do this? Well, we do this because it reminds us that we are mortal and to dust we shall return. But it also reminds us that God's love has overcome death, that great distance. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is perfected in us. Think about it this way. In the beginning, you were a vulnerable infant. You were in the hands of men and women who didn't know what they were doing. You were, and perhaps still are, a bundle of infinite needs. And then a human being didn't meet one of those needs. Maybe it was a mom, maybe it was a friend or a sibling, but someone failed to meet one of those needs. And you felt the anger of that need not being met. This season of Lent is about enduring the emptiness of unmet needs and surrendering, hanging on in the void of that experience. And what happens, I've discovered over time, is that a new kind of hunger emerges when we endure a season of unmet needs, a new kind of hunger. And it's a kind of hunger that transforms us into something other than a dependent organism in an environment. It turns us into the very love that brought us into being in the first place. This verse just sticks out for me. Because as Jesus is, so are we in the world. As Jesus is, so are we in the world. There's something about that verse that makes me ask this question. Am I willing to suffer for my love? Or do I think it's all about pleasure? Am I willing to suffer? Amen.